I've never upgraded an Optiplex on this channel. I feel like, as a creative endeavour, it's more valid for me to buy and build bespoke systems from scratch than to upgrade a mass-produced OEM system. And yes, like rolling your own cigarettes or spaying your own cat, this is some hipster snobbery bullshit on my part. But today, in recognition of the value of the venerable Optiplexes, Pro Desks and ThinkStations, I've got my hands on a card that would be a perfect way to turn a retired office workhorse into something with some gaming clout. Before I start, a brief tangent. The GTX 750 is a card I've looked at before in less dire circumstances. I was surprised how well it performed in 2020, even with a 120mm case fan gaffer taped to the heatsink. Though as that card was a 1GB model, it didn't have much of a future in a world where even console ports are demanding at least 4GB of VRAM. Lately, it turns out, a bunch of these cards have been shipping from China with 4GB on board, and although they are obscenely expensive, I was sorely tempted. Rather than wait for one to ship from China, however, I went a different route. There's an almost identically spec'd card from Nvidia already, with the same GPU and frame buffer, in the form of the Quadro K1200. Occupying just one slot, requiring no external power, able to be fitted with a half-height bracket, and coming in at less than £90 on eBay. If this can perform anything like its GeForce equivalent, this could be an excellent low-end card for gaming in 2021. Now, I'm actually trying to scale down the number of PCs in my home right now, so I didn't pick up an Optiplex for this test. Instead, I'm looking at the K1200 in my RPG PC. Though its Zen 2 CPU is closer in performance to a Skylake i7, as might be found in some of the more modern pre-builts, it shouldn't score more than a few frames faster than the classic Intel 3000 and 4000 series CPUs that are more often found in used workstations these days. So I'm usually a glass half empty person, but this series has made me feel more charitable, so I'll start with some of the better results. Rocket League should surprise no one here, as it scores 111 FPS on average at 1080 quality, bringing it in line with some of the old GCN1 cards, and handily beating Vega integrated graphics. Fortnite at 1080 Pro settings isn't quite as rosy a picture as Rocket League, scoring just shy of 60 FPS. This isn't unplayable by any stretch, and dropping resolution scaling or loading up performance mode could make things even smoother, but in context, the only discrete GPUs I've tested that scored lower were the GT 705, 710 and HD 6870. Yeah, I know, I swore I'd leave GTA 5 alone this year, but like with the K2200, I felt like this card had slipped under a lot of people's radar, so you might like to know how it does in one of the most popular games of all time. Running at the same settings as the K2200 resulted in a pretty unplayable experience in the low 30s, but dropping to 1080 normal saw an average FPS of 72. Sure, it won't look as pretty, but if you just want to join your friends online or enjoy story mode, this should make for an enjoyable experience. Valheim can be pretty demanding, but it also doesn't need high FPS to be enjoyable. At 720 medium, the K1200 can churn out 47 FPS on average at the time of testing. As usual, I have to mention this game is still in development, so performance is likely to change over time. RE Village has the benefit of being one of the first games to implement FSR, which is a convenient way of dropping resolution for extra performance. Some claim FSR gives better quality than simply dropping resolution, but let's just say I have my doubts. Regardless, 1080 performance with FSR quality enabled averages 36 FPS. However, it does also dip into the 20s, which can cause slowdown in gameplay and cause cutscenes to become desynchronized from the audio, so you may wish to try a lower setting. Apex Legends isn't a great fit for the K1200. I happen to feel that this type of game needs both a constant high FPS for responsiveness, as well as a high enough resolution to identify targets easily, and in this case, you would have to pick one. I tested at 720 low and got a little bit over 50 FPS, which I would still argue is still acceptably fast, but 1280 by 720 does make visibility a bit more challenging than I'd like. The K1200 can manage a pretty solid 30 FPS in Genshin Impact at 1080 medium. Unlocked, the game runs at 39 FPS on average and only barely drops under 30. This is on par with the results from AMD's integrated graphics, and a pretty sizable 20% drop from the K2200. Forza 4 dips into the mid-20s at 1080 medium and averages only slightly over 30. This would definitely be an occasion to drop to 900 or 720, as I don't think the game is particularly playable otherwise. The K1200 isn't a Kepler card, but it's still from a time when Nvidia and Vulkan didn't see eye to eye. Hence, Doom Eternal doesn't so much run as collapse on itself. At 720 low, the card simply can't sustain 30 FPS in an action-heavy scene. The last low TDP, potentially low profile card I've tested in this game was the GTX 1650, which costs more than twice as much, but performs more than twice as well here. Cyberpunk is... well, it's a slideshow. No amount of scaling is going to give a playable FPS here, except for perhaps as a meme. 720 low just pushes past 20 FPS on average. Maybe consider playing this one on GeForce Now. Horizon Zero Dawn was better than expected following on from Cyberpunk, but still stretches the definition of a playable experience. 28 FPS at 720 performance is pretty rough going, but the frame rate was at least stable. Again, this isn't going to be this card's forte. Watch Dogs Legion averages 26 FPS at 720 low in DX12, and actually scored a bit worse in DX11. This might be the final nail in the coffin for the K1200 for many people. At 720 low, the K1200 can only run Call of Duty Warzone at just above 35 FPS, with frequent drops into the 20s. On the positive side, the game is clearly using the extra VRAM of this card. Although it's still ugly as sin, the textures actually look better than the GTX 1060 3GB. In a vacuum, a Quadro K1200 is a reasonably inexpensive graphics card that can potentially turn a small form factor office PC into something capable of running some more modern games at low settings, and can even power a pretty amazing experience in esports and competitive titles. The 4GB frame buffer isn't a huge benefit, as most games that require that much VRAM still perform pretty poorly here, but if your alternative was Intel HD graphics or, worse, a GT 710, this could still make for a worthy upgrade. Outside of the vacuum, however, there are other things to consider. The K2200 I reviewed recently actually costs about the same as the K1200 and performs significantly better. Low-profile GTX 1050 and 1050 Ti's might be hard to come by right now, but if you're hoping to play titles like Warzone, Forza or Doom Eternal, they are much better options. Even the GTX 1650, which is unreasonably expensive these days, might look like better value overall. As always then, the quality of the card is defined by the price. And in late 2021, if you can get this for less than the average asking price of £80, it's a worthy pickup for a budget small form factor gaming system. Thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.